Today we will be adding and subtracting, multiplying decimals, 4-7. So let's take a look at sets of directions. We'll see it says to estimate, but first we need to simplify. So we're going to simplify these expressions and then estimate to check our answer. So let's take a look at our first problem here, and it says that we have 9 plus 5 and 6/800. So the important thing to do when adding and subtracting decimals is to line up the decimal points. So you don't see the decimal point on the 9, so the decimal point always goes after the number. And so when I rewrite this problem, I'm going to write it as 9 and then put the decimal. Now I'm going to need two placeholders. So I'm going to put 0 and another 0. That's the same thing as having 9, it's just in a different form. And so we bring down the 5, we bring down the decimal point, the 6, and the 8. So I add this together. So when I add this, I get 8, 6, bring that decimal point down, and that makes 14. So 14 and 6/800 is my answer. Now we want to estimate. So remember, we had some rules with estimating way back in chapter 4, I think it was section 1. And what we did when we're adding is we take the numbers and we see which one, see if it's closer to the half. So for instance, 5 and 6/800. Instead of closer to 6, we're going to say it's about 5.5 or so. And then I'm going to say the 9 is, well, exactly 9. So if I add that together, I end up with 14.5. And that's pretty close to this number. So I say, yeah, that's reasonable. It seems about right. And so we'd have our answer there. So when we subtract, it's the same thing. We're putting the bigger number on top, and we just have to line up the decimals. So 8.55. And so when I do the subtraction, I'm going to end up having to borrow. And I got to borrow all the way back to this 1. Change that to a 0. A 15 to a 14, the 15 here to a 14, and then I can go ahead and do the subtraction. So when we have that, we have 11 minus 5 makes 6. 14 minus 5 gives me 9. Bring the decimal point down. This was a 14. And so 14 minus 8 makes 6. And then I have 0 at the end. So 6 and 96/100. Now, does it make sense? Let's check. Well, this is pretty close to 15.5. And this is close to 8.5. When I subtract them, the halves are going to cancel, and so it's just 15 minus 8, which makes 7. So yes, that is reasonable. 7's really close to 6 and 96/100. For this next problem, again, we're going to line up the decimals, so 6 and 23/100. Line up the decimals here, 3 and 62/100. We'll subtract again, because that's what it's asking us to do, and we end up not having to borrow on the first one, but the second one we do. So 6 to a 5, do the subtraction, we're left with a 6, decimal point comes down, and then a 2. So 2 and 61/100. Well, does it make sense? Is it reasonable? Well, let's check. 6 and 23/100, pretty close to 6. And 3 and 62/100, pretty close to 3.5. And so when I do the subtraction, taking away 3.5 from 6 leaves me with 2.5. So half and half make 1, 2 and 3 make 5, plus that 1 makes 6. So yeah, 2.5 is pretty close to 2 and 61/100. So yes, it makes sense. Well, looking at our last one, again, we're lining up the decimals, 36 and 36/100 plus 54 and 54/100. So we go ahead and add those two numbers together. And so when we're adding, again, 6 and the 4 make 10, so I have to carry the 1, and then 1, 3, and 5 end up making 9. Bring the decimal point down. Add these numbers, 6 and 4 make 10. 1, 3, 5 make 9, so 90 and 9/10, or 90 and 90/100. So either way, it means the same exact thing. So let's check for reasonableness. So 36 and 36/100, pretty close to 36.5. 54 and 54/100, pretty close to 54.5. So the 5/10 and 5/10 make 1, and then I just have to add 54 and 36. Well, that makes 90. So adding those two numbers together makes 91. Yeah, that's pretty close to 90 and 9/10, so yes, it makes sense. Well, the next part is multiplying. So when we multiply decimals, we don't have to worry about lining up the decimal points. You just line it up like you would do a regular multiplication problem. And then just leave the decimal point in there, because we're going to deal with that at the end. So I go ahead and multiply, and here's what I get. I go 7 times 2 is 14. 7 and 4 makes 28, plus 1 makes 29. 7 and 7 and 6 make 42, plus 4, or plus the 2 makes 44. So I've got 44 and 94 hundredths. And so from there, I want to check for reasonableness. Well, actually, I need to deal with the decimal. See how there's 2 points, or 2 spaces, after the decimal here. And so that's the amount of space I need to go back. So my answer is 44 and 94 hundredths. And that's the answer I end up getting. So now we're going to check for reasonableness. Now the rule with multiplication is, again, we want it to go fast. So we round to the nearest number. And so 7, well, that's 7. 6 and 42 hundredths, closer to 6 than 7, so we'll go with 6. So 42. And it's going to always be a little bit further off with the rounding or the estimating when we're dealing with multiplication. So a little bit off, but not too bad. It's pretty close. It's definitely reasonable. That's what we're checking for here. So this next one, I do 7 and 16 hundredths. And then again, you don't worry about where that decimal point is. It just so happens to line up here. And then you multiply. So this makes 18. 3 and 1 make 4. 3 and 7 make 21. And then I move it back. Now watch how many spaces I'm moving it back. I count up the spaces. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I move it back. 1, 2, 3, 4. So the number is 0.2148. So it's read as 2,148 10,000ths is what we're in there. So if I wanted to check for reasonableness, now with this one, I can't round to the nearest whole number. I'm going to have to round this just to 0.03. Leave it like that, but leave 7 is just 7 and 16 hundredths is just 7. So when I multiply that, I get 21, then move the decimal back 2 spaces. Well, it makes 21 hundredths. Really close to 2,148 10,000ths. It's just 48 10,000ths off. Well, that looks good. Let's take a look at the next one. This is some double-digit multiplication. So I've got 1.9 there, so I'm going to have to do some extra work here. So this makes 18. Another 18 plus 1 makes 19. And 63 and 1 makes 64. So carry a 0 and then multiply. And I like multiplying by 1 because you just rewrite the numbers. And so I got this 2, 2, and the 7, and then add the numbers up. So 8, this makes 11, carry a 1, so it makes 7, and this makes 13. So I have to move the decimal 3 spaces. So notice how there's 1, 2, 3 numbers after the decimal. 1, 2, 3, so 13 and 718 thousandths. So let's check for reasonableness. Well, 1.9, pretty close to 2. 7 and 22 hundredths, close to 7. So that makes 14. Yeah, real close to that number. Just a little bit off. So let's try the next one. 5 and 3 tenths, 8 and 4 tenths. So we're multiplying and we just line up. Now it just so happened the decimals line up, but it's not necessary when you multiply. So that makes 12. 20 and 1 make 21. Carry a 0, that makes 24. Carry 2. 8 and 5 make 40, plus 2 makes 42. Add those numbers up, we get 2, 5, 4, and 4. Move the decimal back. How many spaces? Well, only 2 this time because there's 2 numbers after the decimal point. So it goes right there. 44 and 52 hundredths. Is it reasonable, though? Well, let's check. So 5 and 3 tenths, close to 5. 8 and 4 tenths, close to 8. That number makes 40. Yeah, that's pretty close. Close enough for us. Know it's about in the right ballpark at least. Well, now we've got some word problems. And remember, we've got either add, subtract, multiply, or different operations we're using here. So let's see what we do on this one. Jordan jogged 4.8 miles each day for 21 days last month. How many miles did she jog last month? Well, when you see the words 4.8 miles each day, and we jogged for 21 days, well, if we did this amount of miles one day, it'd be just 4.8 miles. 2 days, we'd have to add another 4.8 to 4.8. 3 days, you have to add another 4.8. So we're having to add consecutively. So it's going to be this 4.8 plus 4.8 plus 4.8 plus 4.8. You see, you have to keep on adding it up 21 times. 21 times, because that's how many days they ended up doing this exercise, this jogging. So what we could do that would be quicker would just be 4 8/10 times by 21. And then just multiply and come up with your answer. So this makes 8, and this is 4, carry a 0. We got 16, and 8 plus 1 is 9. So we add that up, we get 8, carry a 1, and that makes 10. Move the decimal back just one space, so that makes 100 8/10 miles is our answer. Well, the next one says in the Pacific Ocean, the Philippine Trench is 10 5/100 kilometers deep. In the Atlantic Ocean, the Brazilian basin is 6 1200 kilometers deep. How much deeper is the Philippine Trench than the Brazilian Trench? How much deeper? And so, what do you think we have to do on this problem? Well, we know that the Philippine Trench is 10.05 or 10 5/100 meters deep, or kilometers deep. Well, the Brazilian one is only this far. It's only this much of this entire amount. It's only the 6 1200. So what we want to find is how much deeper this one is. We want to find this amount right in here. And so what I need to do is I need to take this portion away from the 10 5/100. I need to take the 6 1200 away from this number, and that will give me my amount I need. And so I just write it out as a subtraction problem. Make sure you line up those decimals, though, when we subtract. And when we do this, we end up having a 3, or borrow from the 1 and change that to a 0, borrow from the 10, change it to a 9, and then do the subtraction. So we end up with a 9 there, and this makes a 3, so we have 3 93/100. And is it kilometers? Yes, it is. Kilometers is the difference in the two. Well, look at our last one. It says the student tickets for basketball playoffs cost $9.25 each. That means just for one ticket. How much do 9 student tickets cost? So that'd be like doing this: doing 9 2500 plus 9 2500 plus 9 2500. And how many times would I have to write that out? Well, I'd have to do it 9 times. 9 times. That's why they call this times, is because we need to multiply. And so we're going to do this. We're going to do 9 2500 times by 9, and that'll give us our answer quicker, rather than adding up 9 2500 each time. So this makes 45. 9 and 5 do. 9 and 2 make 18, and 4 make 22. 81 is what I get when I do 9 times 9 plus 2 makes 83. And I need to move the decimal back 2 spaces. So there it is. $83.25 is the cost of those 9 tickets. Now those are the problems on tonight's homework. Good luck.